In our last episode, I contained some of my surprise at just how few politicians come from the working class. After all, we discussed pre-election and have had it confirmed post-election that there is a formidable working class electorate. Then why wouldn't our representatives, represent us? Despite the general preoccupation with elections every 2 to 4 years, the results of these races affect us every day. The likelihood of working class people experiencing change is significantly higher when working class people are in elected office, because they understand the reality of trying to get by. But we know that the working class path to legislating is paved with challenges. In last week's episode, we heard from 2 candidates about exactly that. But is it any harder once they're in office? This is Shifting Terrain. I'm Rachel Rybacek, a working class sociologist and organizer. I've spent a long time thinking about race and class, most recently in politics. In today's episode, I'm talking with Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, who arrived in D.C. as a proudly working class Latina with a mandate. You'll hear some real talk about what it's like when you make it to one of the most powerful decision-making roles in the country, and what it looks like when you never forget who you're representing. I'm talking with Congresswoman Delia Catalina Ramirez, representing Illinois' 3rd Congressional District as the first Latina elected to Congress in Illinois and the entire Midwest. Welcome to Shifting Terrain.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Can you share some of your story and what inspired you to run for state legislature back in 2018?
Look, I often tell people, yes, I'm a congresswoman. Yes, my name is Delia Ramirez, but more importantly is who I come from. And so I often like to introduce myself as, more importantly, the daughter of Maria and Luis Ramirez, 2 Guatemalan immigrants who came to this country seeking an opportunity to have basic needs met. My parents have 3rd and 9th grade education. They've had to live a life of a lot of sacrifice and hard work, but that there's no excuse for not being someone that is committed to helping others. I grew up in a small little church, primarily ran by immigrant community who decided we have a church building with 12 apartments and we want to provide shelter to families who are experiencing the crisis of gentrification. And we may not have a lot of resources, but we know something called crowdsourcing and mutual aid before we even thought of mutual aid being popular. And so coming from that space, coming from the nonprofit world, understanding that it only can really be done through coalition, that really led me to a place of always spending my life asking the questions why. Why is it that people are hungry? Why are people experiencing homelessness? And I think that for me, particularly doing the work I was doing around housing, when my state representative, after 19 years, decided not to run again, said, you need to run. You care deeply about affordable housing. You understand the intersectionality between healthcare, housing, education, the impact of gentrification. You understand what it's like to come from community and live paycheck to paycheck. And we just don't have enough people in our state capital that do and actually going to do something about it. And Rachel, I said no, maybe 50 times. People like me didn't run for office. So it took me a lot of time. I was also going through a horrible, painful divorce and was finally the deputy director of one of the largest advocacy faith-based organizations in the city of Chicago with an endowment. And it meant we didn't depend on government contracts. And it meant that I can lead the organization to do the advocacy and the policy work without the fear of retaliation. And here I was being asked in the middle of your divorce in this new position where you could become the executive director in the next year. We want you to quit your job, figure out how to get through the divorce, figure out how to pay your mortgage, and we want you to run for office because we need you in the state house. Not the easiest sell.
But yet you were sold.
But yeah, I was sold.
What was it? What tipped the scales? When you put it that way, I'm dying to know, what was the compelling reason for you to do it?
You know, I said to people, I've seen you ask others to run for office. And 4 or 6 years later, you are looking for someone else to run against them because they've become the very same thing that we have been fighting. I was saying this to a lot of people that have worked in the community, organizers that had been really working on affordable housing issues, others who were trying to really build an independent political organization. I need to know, where will you be the day after the election? Win or lose the electoral campaign. And I need to know that you understand that the campaign we're about to run is so much bigger than me. And, I also ask people, you want me to run. So what's your skin in the game? How many doors will you knock? How much money will you help me raise? I won't take money from developers. I won't take money from corporations. This is a grassroots campaign. Will you help me build a viable campaign? And I got the assurance from a community who drafted me. I wasn't in the best financial position. I wasn't in the best personal situation. And yet here I was running for office against 3 very competent, qualified, fundraising candidates. And we ran on our values. And we had 300 volunteers in a state house race. And we won with a 28% margin in a 4-way race.
You mentioned 300 volunteers specifically. Is that noteworthy?
It's absolutely noteworthy. If you get 50 people to volunteer on the state house race on a regular basis, you have a great operation. These were people that had never been involved in politics in their life. These were undocumented women who saw me and saw their daughter or saw themselves and said, I can't collect signatures, but I could do childcare. I probably had $2,000 in my bank account and my mortgage was $1,500. My last day of work was December 31st. My car burned down on January 1st, 3 months before the election. My first day unemployed. I also lose my car. And I can't go buy another car because I have no income. And my election's in March. But if I win, I won't start till next January. And I need to tell you about this because what I think is so important and the luckiness for me is that my campaign manager was my campaign manager, but was also a friend who was invested in making sure I was taken care of. They put together a food train for me. Delia needs to be able to eat healthy right now because she has no health care either. Delia really needs to be able to go get her hair done. She's about to go these little things, right? You know what? I'll get her a blow dry. I'll blow dry her hair. So I say all that to say is that having a village that stood with me, that knocked on doors almost as much as I knocked on those doors, I promised 30 days after the election, you will come into a community meeting with me and talk about where we go from here. And we're going to build a political organization out of that. And now we won. And now I have to go honor the things I said I would do.
Amazing. It's like I have chills. Graciela Guzman was also moved by Delia Ramirez's story.
So back during the pandemic, I was executive director of something called Healthy Illinois. Back then, Congresswoman Ramirez was in the State House, as was Representative Ramirez. She championed work that helped make Illinois the first in the country to offer health care to low-income adults, regardless of their immigration status. And that was work that we did tightly hand in hand. Later on, when she was getting ready to run for her congressional, I started doing field work for folks on a progressive slate that included the Congresswoman, and then shifted over to being her field coordinator just because of the amount of importance that we placed in the field to helping secure her victory here in her district.
How did class and race factor into the congressional race, into Ramirez's campaign, either in the ways you sought to connect with voters, but also in how people responded to her?
Yeah, to know Delia is to know that these experiences that she has endured in her life and her family's life, they are one and the same with our community, right? And so it wasn't her kind of, going through her story bank and finding stories to try to cater her to her community. It's a very innate part of how she connects, not just issues, but neighbors, to be able to find place and context. And so, as a lifelong housing advocate, as someone that really dug her hands deep in the immigration and healthcare fight, she was really able to look at folks and say, I believe in a working class agenda, one, because it is one our community wants and one that centers our community, but also because I'm one of you and I'm human and I've lived these things and my family has lived these things. And so if we want to transform our world, we have to wield the power of policy to do that. And she was able to really anchor everything she had been through, her family's experiences, and I think find resonance in our community because, again, she is one of us. And so when we get a Congresswoman Delia Ramirez in the halls of power, we get someone that innately understands the working class agenda and is going to fight for it, because when she comes home to the district, she isn't removed from that reality. She's living the same reality that we are.
What did you see happening out in the world as you were campaigning? People's responses, what were they saying? When you say what she spoke about resonated with folks, how was that coming across?
It feels like energy. It's excitement at, when folks meet an authentic, outgoing, caring person that genuinely cares about what is going on for them at the doors. You couldn't peel Delia off of doors. We couldn't get her to leave events on time because, her happy place is with community, hearing stories, hearing experiences. And so that feels like this energy that just steamrolls into more neighbors understanding, okay, this is our person. And it feels like folks spreading the word organically, like folks building energy around house parties, around canvassing. And so you really felt the people's power in getting Delia elected into office again, because we were excited, we were enamored, still are, and we see her as someone that will champion us. So why aren't we going to champion her?
Congresswoman Ramirez's influence and support led Senate-elect Guzman to run and win a competitive seat in Illinois District 20. Now back to Congresswoman Ramirez. I'm curious, running for office is one thing, but being in office is another.
That's right. Being a campaigner and being an elected official, governance and campaigning are two different things. And the best elected official understands how to do both. I said, we're going to build a political organization that is bigger than me. I said that. And Rachel, the crazy part, right? I felt the mandate. I won in a four-way race by the margins I did. There was an expectation, a lot of pressure. And I think what made it possible for me to be an effective legislator is the issues that I was going to go legislate on were things that were personal to me, had been the things I had worked on for a long time, but I had to demonstrate to my community that I wouldn't become another politician that promised things and then came back and made an excuse. Oh, well, I'm a freshman. Well, it's not that easy. It'll take me 6 years. And what I think helped me run for Congress in this next four-way race that I went into is the receipts I had from the State House. I said that I wanted to make sure that we democratized Chicago's school board, the only school board in the entire state that wasn't elected but was appointed. And so in my first 3 years in the State House, I sponsored the bill that created an elected representative school board. And after 18 years of a coalition working on this in the General Assembly, myself and the Senate sponsor got it to the finish line. I said that I would go ahead and expand healthcare, and I helped negotiate a Medicaid expansion to include non-citizens in the state of Illinois, becoming the very first state in the nation. Of course, California followed shortly after, but we were the first. And then I created a housing committee. And I say it sounds so easy, right? None of that was easy. All of it was extremely hard. I came in as a new state representative that didn't owe anyone in the State House my position. That is liberating. And also, it means that all responsibility and learning how to legislate is on your own.
Can you clarify what that means? You came in on your own. You weren't beholden to these other people. Why weren't you?
Because most of my colleagues who ran then, and many of them still now, they generally run and they generally want to have the blessing of the current speaker. And the speaker will raise them the money. The speaker will make the calls to the unions, to the corporations, will get them soldiers. And I ran my campaign despite of the speaker. Every single piece of legislation that I have introduced is informed by the coalition and the organizations that are on the ground doing the work. And therefore, they're the ones that are helping me whip the votes. I'm doing an inside-outside strategy with them, right? I am assessing and power mapping with them, which is very different from what you see certainly in Congress and in the state house. It also, Rachel, is crazy, but I was asked to join leadership 2 years after I got in office, the most progressive, leftiest in my General Assembly, because the new speaker recognized my hard work and my ability to bring people together.
So you're again highlighting this importance of relationships and being able to talk with lots of different people, be in coalition.
Authentic coalition.
Sure. Yes, of course. Authentic. I think that's so important to raise that in particular because in politics, I think there's a lot of posturing and authenticity, saying what you need to say to get votes, as opposed to really walking the walk.
Right.
And so something that we're exploring in this show is race and class in politics in particular. There are people who come from working class backgrounds who don't necessarily champion or advance legislation that benefits the working class. And so I'm curious how you see race and class affecting the positions you take in Congress.
So I'm going to push back a little on that to say that I absolutely believe your class position influences the policy positions you take. With that said, some of us, because of where we come from, are going to come in narrowly focused on advancing a working class agenda. Others are coming in and saying, I have been poor and I'm no longer going to be poor, so I'm going to learn how to profit from the system. Or we'll say, well, why can he be rich and I can't be rich? Why could he invest in stocks and I can't invest in stocks? Or, you know what, this salary in Congress of 174 and really 100 when you really look at it after taxes is not enough if I'm going to live a life that is a truly middle-class person. So, I'm going to do a little lobby here. I'm going to do a little bit there. I'm going to take a little bit there. And then before you know it, they're caught up in all sorts of things. I don't justify them, but I do understand, having been in the General Assembly, the challenges for someone to be a full-time legislator in a system that is designed specifically for people who are well off, regardless of race and gender. When you put race, gender, and class in it, it's even harder. The point I'm making is, yes, these systems weren't designed for people like me to be in them. And when people like me are in them, right, we make choices. Some of us stay focused and grounded on why we ran and to really be accountable to the people that helped us get in. And others are coming in and saying, I need to figure out how to survive and make it in this place.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious because you're living the life of a congresswoman. You're in the behind the scenes. Are there conversations you're having with colleagues about race and class?
Yeah. I think that it's been hard for some of my colleagues to acknowledge or accept the idea that the Democratic Party can be seen as elitist and exclusive. Because we say, right, and I think a lot of my colleagues say, no, we are the party of the working class. We are the ones that are really enacting the social policies that's going to help lift everyone up. We are not an elitist party because I worked at a McDonald's when I was 15 years old, and I'm not elitist. So I am finding that a lot of my colleagues are trying to prove that they're not elitist, which the more you try to prove you're not elitist, you're elitist. So there is a lot of, Rachel, there's a lot of identity crisis going on among my colleagues in Congress right now. Am I really the person that's fighting for working class? Am I really the person that's fighting for inclusion? Have I been exclusive? But the reality is that we are an elitist party. The reality is that, yes, this Congress is the most diverse Congress we've ever had, and we're still so far away from where we should be. That if the House of Representatives is supposed to be the closest to the people's house, many of my colleagues have no idea what people are going through day to day. And the evidence of that is, Rachel, how shocked they were that Donald Trump won. If we are that shocked that Donald Trump won, then we weren't in the rooms with the people living paycheck to paycheck. We weren't in the rooms doing the kind of listening that helped us understand that it doesn't matter we passed a bill 2 years ago that we're very proud of. The reality is that people are still choosing between an inhaler, paying the rent, and groceries. everyday people are complaining about the current reality, and me telling them inflation is down is negating their day-to-day experience and demonstrated how removed we are from their reality. Rachel, when I went to the state house and I had to go look for where to live, I had to figure out there was going to be a per diem, but they weren't going to pay me for 6 weeks. I was thinking, if they do a credit check and I am the housing champion going into this House of Representatives, State House of Representatives, I am going to fail the credit check. I am in tune with what's happening with our folks. I'm doing the advocacy work. I'm also living it in this moment. Fast forward now, Rachel, 2 years ago, my finances have not been the greatest. I was one of the few full-time state legislators who also had to figure out how to navigate running for Congress. I was living the same thing, except, Rachel, for a second, I was ashamed. Why would you feel sorry for someone who just became a congressperson? But I am in tune with what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, to have lived paycheck to paycheck, to have worried about that emergency room visit and the impact it has on someone, not just for 6 months, but in some cases for years to come. That credit check that still haunts me. And that blessing in disguise when Congresswoman Summer Lee and I looked at each other and said, hey, you want to get an apartment together? I heard there's a former member of Congress, progressive from Texas, who is looking to fill his unit and he won't do a credit check.
Wow. I mean, this is a little bit blowing my mind because this isn't really talked about, right?
You're not supposed to.
Right. That's the thing. That's part of what I'm hoping with this show. It's like, let's talk for real about what's going on, especially because if we want more working class people in political office, we have to address the barriers to getting them there. Money is a huge barrier.
That's right.
What do you see as the differences aside from the campaigning? You know, once you're there, you have had to navigate more challenges than some other folks. And how did that play out?
This is such a personal day-to-day. It's not just a constituent we're talking about when we're talking about the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, the challenges in not having fully funded neighborhood schools. It is our nephews, our nieces, our goddaughters, our mothers, and our fathers. And while I make what I make, what people don't know is how much I'm pouring into helping others, right? That are still living the challenges and the realities of every day. And therefore, I govern differently. So people said, well, manage your expectations, Delia. You're one of 435. You know, Delia, you won't really be able to bring people in the way you did then because now you're in Congress and you're spending 4 days a week there. When you're staffing up, you should really be staffing up with a lot of DC people because really this is a DC position. So the system tells you must govern a particular way. And we came in saying, what would happen if we reimagined what a people's House representative would look like with a sense of urgency and a team that, yes, could learn how to navigate DC and Congress, but more importantly, shared our values and the urgency of delivering for our constituents. And Rachel, that meant that in my first 2 years, we served over 3,000 constituents. In my first year, I passed a bipartisan bill in veteran affairs, not a renaming of a post office, which I'm not trying to put shade on many of my colleagues, but that is the bill that they passed. And maybe some of them are there for 5 years. But I passed my very first bill. I have been punching it out with Marjorie Taylor Greene in Homeland Security as one of the few progressive voices in Homeland. So learning how to be a member of Congress in a minority who has no choice but to deliver for their people and will not make an excuse that because I'm in the minority, I can't deliver. And it's how I was able to bring $14.1 million in my first year back to my district. Because Rachel, my folks and I are very clear who I am accountable to, where my policy comes from, and I don't have 10 years to have some form of seniority to help my people.
We've talked in other episodes, even you've touched on, there are very obvious challenges to running for and holding office as a working class woman of color I'm also hearing strengths and advantages that you're bringing to this. And I'm wondering, do you see those as the advantages or assets of being somebody working class and a woman of color?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking that question. There are assets and contributions that people like me, people like Congressman Chuy Garcia, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman and Summer Lee, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Greg Casar bring that this party, but this Congress desperately need more of. They need more people that can roll up their sleeves and have real conversations with everyday people about what's fucked up in this world and what's it going to take to change it. Then you would see more constituents trusting government. You would see more electorate excitement for elections because people would feel like the person that represents them is relatable to them. If Delia, who struggled in high school, almost didn't graduate, mother, third grade education, not the best financial credit score, can be an effective member of Congress without a Harvard degree, so can I. But also, I actually am more representative of the American people and therefore more deserving to be in the people's house than the rich and elite who represent 1% of the American people. We need more people's house people in the people's house. And we would be far more effective, we'd be far more relatable, and also not surprised when things would go a certain way because we would actually be in tune with everyday people.
Absolutely. And so what is part of the confusion, I think, in moments about this recent election outcome? And in this show, in my life, we were talking about working class voters before the election. And now a lot of people are talking about working class voters. And there is now this confusion about who's the party of who. I've been hearing people say, well, the Democratic Party is now the party of the upper middle class. I said, well, the Republican Party is the party of the billionaires. But I think you are pointing to something very particular about authentically connecting with people around their struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a more effective messaging strategy for some Republican candidates. But I wonder, what do you think all of this means for the future of politics from where you're sitting right now in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, if the Democrats want to move from being an elitist party to the party of the working class, what fundamentally has to change about everything that it has within its DNA and even within its own formation? Who must get out of the way? Electing a DNC chair that represents the very same elitist space that we say we are not. Telling people you must be a billionaire in order to run for governor. I believe that when we spend more time convincing Republicans to vote for us, that they are more like us, then we shouldn't be shocked that so many people didn't vote for a Democrat or didn't vote at all. I said to a group of my colleagues, you need to spend less time in DC and more time in your district. And you have to stop making excuses about a filibuster or not having enough votes or about the process of a discharge petition and actually show people that you're fighting like hell for them. Telling people that we can't pass immigration reform because of filibuster is BS. We haven't passed immigration reform because we haven't had the political courage to actually do it. And Rachel, if I'm being completely honest with you, we are where we are not because of Donald Trump, but because of failure of our own party to actually represent the people. And one of the things we could be doing is asking ourselves, how do we make it easier for everyday people to run for office and represent their communities? And it won't change if we don't start talking about campaign finance reform. It won't change until we get money out of politics. It won't change until we start saying these corporations will no longer have influence in the way that I vote when it comes to Medicare for all, or a Green New Deal, or housing. It won't change until we say I declare war on corporate landlords. It won't change. And so the party has to make a decision of who it's going to be because the electorate has decided that I'm done with parties. I'm looking for who is going to represent me. You don't have to move to the center or move to the right. That wasn't what people said in this election. What people said in this election was, You do not connect with me. You don't listen to me. You live in your Lala elitist world. And I'm tired of the establishment. And I'm looking for someone who's going to fight like hell for me. Give me someone or I won't vote. Even if it means to the detriment of having to figure out how to survive. Because, Rachel, people have had to survive for such a long time.
It's just everything you're saying is resonating so deeply. And I think, Will, to listeners, is there anything you want to add that I didn't think to ask you about?
I would wrap up in saying to you, over the next few weeks, few months, you're going to hear a lot of conversation about identity politics, right? What does it mean to be Latina and a member of Congress and working class or come from working class? What does it mean to create an agenda that specifically identifies how to uplift a particular group of people, women, Asian Americans, Black women, right? And there's going to be a big fight on that, right? And many who are going to say, that doesn't matter because these issues impact everyone. What I am saying to you is that representation matters, and a working class agenda doesn't care your race. Meaning that Latino people want to be able to open up a business. They want to be able to buy a home. And they also want to see themselves in who represents them. It's not an either or, it's an and. And I am really worried that between Republicans really shattering diversity, equity, inclusion, and Democrats who are saying that doesn't matter anymore, that we're going to lose the point, which is representation matters. I have a specific personal experience with Latin America, and therefore I can talk about policies that actually address root cause of migration in a way that perhaps someone that didn't can't, right? And that is good. And I also can talk about the impacts of minimum wage, the impacts, right, of discrimination because of gender, and the impacts of not being able to afford healthcare. We can do both, and we shouldn't dismiss one for the other.
Absolutely. That intersection is so critical to advancing these progressive policies. You mentioned some of the things in Illinois that seem similar to some of the legislation in Minnesota, also that people were attributing, they were calling Minnesota Miracle when Tim Walz came on the scene. But that came from years of people similarly on the ground organizing and in conversation with legislators to make some of that progressive policy for working people happen. Do you see that as a parallel?
None of the policy moves without the outside coalition influencing it, agitating it, and pushing it along. Yeah. We will not get through the next 4 years of Donald Trump without movement, coalition on the ground leading the way. This is a moment where elected officials need to step back, listen to movement, listen to coalitions, and be in partnership with them, not for them. And I think if we have learned anything, is that the work that we do that's most effective is effective when you bring the most people impacted by that issue front and center to address the issue. And we need to do that in this moment.
Great. Our next episode will be about that exactly. This is an incredible segue. Thank you so much. It has been such an honor to speak with you.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. Thank you.
As Congresswoman Ramirez explained, not only do our elected leaders need to return to their districts to listen to the people they represent, they need to take their lead. In next week's episode, we'll be hearing about the headline-making moves of the Minnesota Miracle, a true model of what it takes to win for the working class. That's coming up on Shifting Terrain. If you like what you've heard, please follow the show and share it with people you know. Shifting Terrain was executive produced by Amanda Cowper and myself, Rachel Rybacek. Production consulting and audio mixing by Karen Given. Music by Blue Dot Sessions. Thank you to our guests, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez and Senator-elect Graciela Guzman. And a special thank you to eMedia. See you next week.